Okay, so we're going to go over the ecology slides today. So ecology, as it says, is the study of living organisms and their interaction in the environment. The thing with the word ecology is we've been talking a lot this year about the fact that things have prefixes and suffixes. Eco starts like ecosystem, is a system of understanding living and non-living things. Ology at the end, like biology, sociology, psychology, means the study of. So ecology is the study of ecosystems. Okay. Bio in biosphere. Bio is a prefix that means life. Sphere means round, three-dimensional, like a globe. So the biosphere is the living sphere, which is the living part of the earth. You've got the word bio, the prefix bio, and biotic. Tic means like a factor. Bio means life. So a living factor. When you add a in front of a word like abiotic, a is a prefix that means non. So if biotic means the living factors, abiotic means the non-living factors. Okay, so in looking at this next slide, we've got our biotic factors: fish, trees, mushrooms, bacteria, humans, parasites. Abiotic: soil, rocks, temperature, air, water, and sunlight. An organism's habitat is where it lives. It's where the organism is affected by both biotic and abiotic factors. When we talked at the beginning of the year, we talked about the characteristics and needs of living things. A habitat is where an organism gets all of its needs. It gets its food, its water, its living space. It can find a mate, a place where it can maintain homeostasis. And within that place where an organism lives, it can even have a more specific role to play, and that role is called a niche. So looking at this next slide, we can see that, and by the way, a habitat can be within an ecosystem. Like I can have a forest habitat, right? A forest, but within that, I can have the trees are a habitat. That's like the place where the eagles nest and they live. And the eagles may use bodies of water near the trees to hunt for fish and small mammals. Well, within that forest ecosystem in the sunny areas, and other plants, you get lots of flowering plants. Well, that's where the bees are. The bees are near the flowers. They're pollinating flowers. They're getting nectar to make honey. Within that same forest, you can have a habitat of a pond, which is the place where the frogs are going to live. They're going to live near there. They're going to lay eggs. They're going to feed on insects, small fish, and whatnot. Okay, when you have organisms that inhabit the same niches within a habitat, within an ecosystem, that's where you can have competition occurring, right? We're trying to fight for the same resources to help us survive. Resources are limited, food's limited, water's limited, mates are limited, living space is limited. And all of these things cause animals to do different things. Like that's why you have so many animals that have like dances when they want to mate, or they have colors, or they show by strength, because everything's competing, right? Survival of the fittest. Things are competing for resources. So predation is an idea that is a example of a predator-prey relationship. So it's a type of relationship that happens within these ecosystems. And so predation, the word predator and predation kind of start the same, so that's how you know they're related. But a predator feeds on a prey. So like a lion feeds on a zebra, feeds on an antelope in the savannah. A fox is a predator for a mouse or a rabbit. So those are predator-prey relationships. Usually one organism is a predator, the other one is the prey that gets eaten. There are other relationships within communities, within habitats and ecosystems, and symbiosis is a general term that describes a close relationship. So that means two organisms have some kind of close relationship, and the three types of relationships they can have are mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. And these can be compared to your friendships to keep them straight. So in mutualism, two organisms benefit. So we have mutual friendships, one where we have a really good friend that's really good to us, and we're really good to that friend, and we each get something out of the relationship. Some organisms have parasitic relationships called parasitism. Well, one organism benefits, the other gets hurt, like a mosquito taking blood from a human. So we have friendships like this, right? We're really good to one friend, but they're not very good to us. They kind of take our energy, they take our kindness for granted, they're kind of selfish, they kind of take a lot from the relationship, right? And then there's commensalism, where one organism is helped, the other is not helped or hurt. So an example, really good example of this is a barnacle on a whale. The barnacle gets a place to live on the whale. The barnacle is a filter feeder, so as the whale swims around, the barnacle gets food. The whale's not helped or hurt. We might look at it and be like, oh my God, the poor whale, look how ugly it looks, but it's not really hurting the whale. So we have friendships like that where, you have this friend, you could take him or leave him. They kind of hang out with you. They don't really bother you. You don't enjoy them that much, but they're not doing any harm, but they get a lot of it. They really enjoy being your friend, right? So there's your commensalistic friendships. So if that helps you keep those things straight, then good. All right, so examples of some of these. We talked about the barnacle and the whale being commensalism, but a tapeworm living in a mammal like a dog. Dogs get tapeworms. The tapeworms are parasites that take the food from the dog's intestines and take the nutrients out of the food. And so that hurts the dogs. The dog's getting less nutrients. Cows, birds such as egrets sometimes will land on top of a cow in a field. And this benefits the bird because the bird's getting protection. The bird's getting to eat the insects off the cow. The cow's not helped, not hurt, doesn't have an arm to shoo that bird away, but so it just lets it hang out. Ants and aphids. Aphids are tiny insects that can make sugar-rich substances for the ants to eat. The ants protect the aphids. That's a mutualistic relationship. Mistletoe is a vine that can grow on a tree. It can weaken the tree by taking the nutrients from the tree. And so that's a parasitic relationship. Flowers and bees, a great example of mutualism. The flowers get the bee to help it pollinate and fertilize and make new plants, whereas the bees get the nectar to be able to make honey. Within ecosystem, we have levels of organization. They're very important to understanding the different terms. So not on here is the first is the individual. And I should have maybe said this earlier, but an ecosystem is defined by the person studying it. So an ecosystem involves the living and the non-living things and how they interact. So you could talk about your fish tank ecosystem, and you'd talk about the fish in there, the plants in there, and then also the non-living things like the water and the temperature of the water and the pH of the water, things like that. That would be studying an ecosystem. We could talk about the ecosystem of this classroom, the ecosystem of Port Jeff Station. We could talk about the ecosystem of the United States, right? How do you want to define what you're studying? So within the ecosystems, there are different levels. So let's talk about the classroom for a minute as an example. Right here, you're all here, and you are all individual organisms. You have needs. You have to satisfy the needs of living things. You're breathing, getting air. Maybe you're not eating now, but at some point you're going to need to eat. You have living space to do things, all of that. We here together are a population of humans. So when you're talking about lots of the same types of organisms, that's a population. We also have a population of plants in the room. We have a population of things you can't see that are live, like fungi and bacteria, which are also living in this classroom. We also have non-living factors. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but when we talk about the other non-living populations, now we have a community. So the humans, with the bacteria, with the fungi, with the plants, that's our community here in this classroom. In addition, we have non-living factors. And once you add the non-living factors and have that discussion, now you have the ecosystem. So we have air in here. We have sunlight coming through the windows. We have a temperature in the classroom. These are all non-living things which are affecting all of the community of organisms here. Finally, you have a biome, which is a large area with lots of different ecosystems. So examples of biomes: a desert, which is a very dry and usually hot place. We have a frozen desert, which is also dry but not hot, called a tundra. We live in a more moderate temperature, so we live in a deciduous forest area where the trees lose their leaves. And we get moderate rainfall here. So if you heard me mention the things that affect a biome, it's really the climate, which is a combination of the average temperature and average rainfall, not the weather. We've had a lot of rain yesterday. We may not get as much rain today. We wouldn't say that, oh, we get no rain here on a sunny day. But over time, we get a certain amount of rainfall, a certain temperature throughout the year. We actually have changing seasons here, unlike a tropical rainforest, which is a different biome, which is pretty much 80s all year round and very humid, lots of rain. And that's a great place for organisms, so you get a lot of biodiversity in places like that. And by the way, a rainforest, once you take away the trees and clear a rainforest, you can never get that amount of biodiversity back because the organisms just can't get back into the same roles they play, the niches within their environment. Okay, and finally, above biome, you would have the biosphere, which is that the earth, the living sphere, the living earth. So again, just to recap, an organism is an individual. The same type of organisms is a population. When you talk about different populations, you have a community. When you add in the non-living factors that affect the community of organisms, you have an ecosystem. And when you have many ecosystems that have the same climate and precipitation throughout a region, that's called a biome. And then you have lots of biomes that make up our biosphere, which is our living earth. So in terms of examples, I'm going to go through the top examples in each category. You've got a minnow, which is a small fish. That's an organism. You have a population of minnows. A school of minnows is a population. A community, the bees, birds, wildflowers, trees, and maybe the minnows, right? That's a community. Then the ecosystem, we add in the non-living factors. Now we're adding rock, soil. We again have the bees, birds, wildflowers, trees, pond, minnows, etc. Some types of ecosystems, we have aquatic ecosystems, which have water. You have freshwater ecosystems like moving water, rivers and streams, standing water, lakes and ponds, marine ecosystems that have salt concentrations, and then you have estuaries, which is where the fresh water runs off land into salt water. And when you have fresh water and salt water meeting, you have brackish water. And that's very important living here on Long Island because we have this happening a lot. If you go to West Meadow Beach, and you go to the beach side, you're looking at the Sound, that's all salt water. But if you go to the left and you walk down that road at West Meadow Beach, there on the left side, that's an estuary. All the water runs off the land, the fresh water goes into the salt water coming from the Sound, and it mixes. And you get that brackish water. And those are really unique ecosystems. We're very lucky to have them. They're places that birds nest and fish come to migrate to lay their eggs because it's usually calm there. And so you get a lot of life and a lot of unique organisms living in those places. Okay, so I just want to touch on some of the other biomes. So you want to take a look up here and look at the plant and animal species. I'm not going to read that, but I do want to touch on some of these unique climates that these biomes have. So like a tundra, you said, was a frozen desert. It's a place that's normally very cold, and it gets very little rainfall. So like Antarctica is a tundra, right? You can see the animals that live there. They don't need a lot of water. They're usually white in color to kind of blend with the surroundings. And so here's another one, another terrestrial. Terrestrial means land. A taiga, it has a lot of conifers, which are cone-bearing plants, the evergreens. And the temperature changes throughout the season, so it has seasons, but it's generally colder than more moderate places like a deciduous forest. So an example would be Maine, Vermont, New England, Canada, those are considered taigas. Tropical rainforest, again, lots of rain. Temperatures are warm but not super hot, and that makes the place very humid, and a lot of things live there. A lot of niches, a lot of organisms are in those different habitats, and so when you take those habitats away, you get rid of the trees, things just can never come back that way, and that's why we work so hard to protect tropical rainforests. Temperate rainforests, they're like tropical rainforests. They get a lot of rain, but they're not as hot. So we have temperate rainforests in the United States, in the Northwest, like in the Seattle, Washington state areas. Okay, we have grasslands. Grasslands are defined by usually being, they can be moderate in temperature, but they can also be very hot. But the thing that really defines them is the fact that they have mostly dry periods, but then they get a lot of rain for some periods. And so they can support lots of grass, but they don't get enough water year round to support lots of trees. So a place that's hot that's a grassland would be a savanna, where you have the antelope, the zebras, the giraffes, the tigers, the lions. Um, and then you have moderate grasslands in the United States, like the Midwest, right? You get coyotes, grizzlies, deer, antelope, rabbits, bison, things like that. Okay, desert, dry. It is hot in the day, but don't forget deserts get very cold at night. They don't have a lot of water to lock in their heat, so their heat escapes very quickly during the day. Water is a great heat source, a heat sink. It has a high heat capacity, which means it takes a long time to heat up, but a long time to cool down. It's why Long Island is so moderate in temperature, because we're surrounded by water. Otherwise, we would be colder like New Jersey, Connecticut, and parts of upstate New York. And not listed here is where we live. We live in a deciduous forest. So we have seasons, average temperatures, moderate rainfall, and so it makes sense for trees here to lose their leaves for part of the year and then grow them back. And that's a successful adaptation here. So we have mostly those type of trees, versus if we were colder, we would be more of a taiga if it was cold enough. All right, so that was today's slideshow. Great job. Thank you for your attention, and good work.